Hello, welcome. We'll start with NCERT class 10, the 7th chapter for political science. Now this chapter exclusively talks about the outcomes of democracy. In the chapters so far, we have been understanding how democracy works, what has been the scenario in India and other nations, and how these nations have tried to attain democracy over the time. So previously, many of the nations were fighting from either monarchy or dictatorship, and slowly and gradually they attained democracy. Now when we talk about the outcomes of democracy, definitely it's people-centric because people are directly involved in it. The next is it tries to maintain the equality of the people or equality among the people, as well as it tries to maintain the economic well-being and provide freedom and dignity to an individual. Now let's have two examples. Let's say I have an example where I have Hitler as a dictator and another nation where you have democracy that is seen. Now what would happen in the two examples? In the example where you have a dictator, he has an independence to take any decision anytime he wants. So the decision making process would definitely be quick, but here it would be through negotiations, there would be arguments, disarguments, and finally the outcome would be there, and there would be certain norms which would be prescribed based on which the decisions could be taken. So definitely there is a contrast between a kind of dictatorship government or a monarchy form of government where the decisions can be much quicker, but the implementation when it comes to the common man, it might not be in favor of the common man, but for a democracy the decisions are maximum in favor of the common man, and therefore we say it's a kind of people-centric approach. Now why we say democracy is better? So that is one thing that we have talked about. Other important things include it provides equality to all citizens. So everyone is equal in democracy and everyone is given equal opportunities and equal rights. The dignity and the freedom of an individual is maintained. The quality of decision making definitely improves because the inputs are more. So let's say this dictator has to take a decision. He has only the ideas that are coming to his mind or to his closest cabinet, but here you would have a kind of participatory approach where lots and lots of inputs and ideas could be taken into consideration, and where you have lots of ideas that are taken into consideration, definitely the results would be much better and much people-centric. Again, resolution of conflicts become much easier in case of democracy, and there is also the room to correct a lots of mistakes that are happening in reality. So democracy is good in principle, but we say it's not that good in practice. Why? Because the attainment of democracy has been different in different economic situations, different social situations. So we have seen how the things have taken place. We have talked about the countries like Nepal, where there was a third wave of independence or a third wave of democracy that was seen. So all those vary with country, with situation, but under democracy what would happen is definitely there would be elections, there would be formation of constitutions, there would be parties, and people or the citizens would be guaranteed certain rights. So those are definitely the added advantage that a democratic government witnesses. Again, if something does not work good, what happens is we try to blame the democracy or doubt the democracy. So what happens as a result is the democracy tries to achieve something and then it tries to rectify the mistake that it has already done. In a country like India, where you have a huge lot of population, the statistics reveal that the countries where dictatorship is a form of government, the economic growth is much better as compared to a democratic nation. Now, definitely this has been what has been statistically proved, but what happens when it comes to a country like India? We have a huge base of poor population that resides in the nation. Now when we have a huge base of poor population, what would happen? Since you have a huge base of poor population that is seen, these poor population or the kind of huge population that is being witnessed becomes the vote bank, and therefore the parties try to have or promote most of the ideas or most of the philosophies in favor of them. However, that should be what should happen practically, but still there are cases where this is not being taken care of, and ultimately the situation worsens. Again, an important concept under governance, or what we talk about democracy, is the concept of art. Under art, we simply say there are three terms that we need to focus on: A for accountability, R for responsibility, and T for transparency. So those three are the basic key factors of the governance. So when we talk about good governance, we talk about that government should be accountable to the people, it should take the responsibility of the common man, and there should be transparency in the system so that whatever takes place is in the public. And a good idea for this was the RTI Act, that is Right to Information Act. So Right to Information Act would be a kind of act that would work towards bringing in more transparency into the system, because now you have the right to question why this had happened or bring out the statistics on certain events. So those are the things that we take into consideration when we talk about the governance or the government functioning. Now, definitely we have talked about how negotiations work in democracy, and democracy you have decision making that takes place through the procedure of norms. Now what are some of the good examples to examine how the decision making takes place through a standard procedure? So definitely we have free and fair elections, we have open public debates on major policies, and the Right to Information Act is one of the important acts that we discuss here. Again, democracy needs to be free from corruption. So being free from corruption is again a step towards better transparency in the system. And when you have the people who are working as a part of the government, it becomes more legitimate, you are more answerable, and people are willing to be ruled by the people from among themselves. So that's the best point of a democratic government. We have already seen how economic growth has been varying in a dictatorship nation, in a nation where there is dictatorship versus democracy. If we look onto the statistics, in the nations where there are democracy like South Africa and Brazil, top 20 people have 60% of the national income. Now this brings in huge amount of economic disparity or economic gap between the rich and the poor, which is visible predominantly in the democratic societies, and the bottom 3% is with 20% of the people. So bottom 3% of the has 20% of the population. So that's basically a big amount that we need to work around, and therefore working on economic disparities is another important issue that we need to mention under democracy, because under democracy we definitely believe in political equality, but bringing in economic equality is again important. The next important aspect is accommodating the kind of social divisions. It's very important that if a majority comes to power, this majority should not overrule the minority. So minority should be given equal representation if possible, or they should be part of the democratic setup, and once these minority are considered into the mainstream, then only we can say we have a kind of successful democracy, because a successful democracy would accommodate all the kind of social divisions that exist into the society. Again, if we see that there is someone who is being barred, then the democracy ceases to operate in that case, and we say that democracy is not accommodative for that person. So barring someone is not a correct option unless and until the person is considered medically or mentally unfit. So those are the cases we keep an exception on. The next is dignity and freedom of an individual, that we have already talked about. So every individual wants respect from others, and as a result we talk about dignity and respect and freedom as the basis for democracy. Now dignity includes dignity of women, treating them equally. Wage struggle is again important, so equal remuneration, equal wages, strengthening the claims of disadvantaged caste, and these are some of the major points that we talk about. So it's basically what makes a difference is the vote, and this vote determines what kind of government would come into action. And once the government comes into action, the concept of art comes in, that's the government should be accountable, responsible and transparent for a better functioning. And more people's participation and people's involvement would help a better government come up with more suggestions, more ideas and more creative approach. So with this we cover the basic outcomes of democracy. We are left with only one chapter in political science. After that we'll start with history class 10. So stay tuned for further updates. Have a very good day ahead.